Jane Velez Mitchell, Jane Unchained Live Talk. We have a global guest list today. We've got Simone in Rome, and we have Amy Jean Davis in Los Angeles. And we are talking about, you're going to hear some roosters chirping in the background, or cockadoodle doing, because you, Simone, are in a sanctuary in Rome. Both of these individuals are lead organizers for the SAVE movement. So we want to get your take on what's happening. And the breaking news is that coronavirus is now spreading in the slaughterhouses around the United States. And I can just show a couple of headlines. We have right here, poultry workers' death highlights spread of coronavirus in meat plants. That was from the New York Times. Here's another one. Hundreds of meat workers have now tested positive for coronavirus. And here's another one in the New York Times. Our cruel treatment of animals led to the coronavirus. So let me start with you. Simone has to be careful because he's with a lot of live animals in a sanctuary. But Amy Jean, what is your reaction now to this growing, the magnitude of the spread of coronavirus in meat plants, particularly here in the United States?
Well, I'm not surprised by it at all. And that's because so many people have been exposed to the virus in all the different jobs that we have here in America. But some of these jobs are labeled as essential, which I understand for healthcare workers. But I don't understand why places like factory farms and slaughterhouses are still up and running. Though it does make sense because these workers are largely immigrants, people of color, people who don't have a choice between this job and no job and not being able to feed their families. So they're mistreated, largely mistreated first of all. And so being in the middle of a pandemic, I don't think is, going to treat the owners are not going to treat their workers any differently. If anything, they're just going to rely on them more to show up to work and be sick and continue to slaughter these animals and get their bodies packaged up for the supermarkets.
So Simone, and my apologies, tell me your last name and what you do for the SAVE movement. Where are you, and what's your reaction to the fact that now there's talk that the meat supplies there will be meat shortages, as if that's a bad thing. I mean, all this started with the abuse of animals in the food system in a slaughterhouse, a wet market, a live market, whatever you want to call it, in Wuhan, China. SARS also started in a live meat market in another province in China. We have mad cow disease, avian flu, swine flu. All of this is from abuse of animals in the food system. And that was the opinion piece that was in the New York Times, talking all about the conditions that led to the emergence of these new infectious diseases, our cruel treatment of animals. What's the take in Europe and in Rome when it comes to these issues and the fact that now there seems to be a backlash or a boomerang effect on the meat industry itself?
So yeah, I'm Simone Scampoli. I'm part of the SAVE movement, and I'm right now in Italy, but I work also for the global movement. And to talk about Italy, in these days is happening something very curious, because there is a journalist that is going live on one of the main channel, and she's exposing what you just said, that also past viruses came from live markets and slaughterhouses and animal farming industries. And the funny thing is that in those days, many farmers and many, sorry for the background, many farmers and many people, CEOs of the main Italian chains, are actually making articles or posting stuff to go against what this journalist is saying online on these main channels. So she is trying to expose, and they are going against her because they are afraid. Yeah, they are very afraid, because she is exposing many facts and many proofs that those viruses are very, very connected and linked to the animal farming industry. So even here, there's so much around. Many people are talking about it. It's the main topic now, and it's impressive how we see this topic on TV now. Every day there is something that is exposing how is linked to the animal farming industry, and I'm impressed to see that many people are talking about, but of course they are trying to say that it's not true. That's funny.
Okay, there's one movement that doesn't want to talk about it at all, and that's the advertiser-based mainstream media. Let's not talk about where all this started, because it might turn people off to eating animals, and that could hurt the meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical industry. Then there are those who want to just talk about it as a problem in China, okay, and say, well, it's the Chinese who have these wet markets. But we and others, many animal welfare, environmental organizations have exposed the fact that no, these live markets exist all over the world. I'm going to show you a photo now of a live market in New York City. Look at the blood drenched on the floor. One scientist, not an animal activist, a scientist, described these kinds of operations as petri dishes for disease. Here is another shot from New York City of somebody with a shopping cart throwing live chickens into the shopping cart, where then they would go and have them slaughtered. So again, it's getting out. I keep coming back to this New York Times opinion piece that just emerged. Our cruel treatment of animals led to the coronavirus, because finally, Amy Jean, we have been working so hard to try to get people to connect the dots, the best and the brightest, the powers that be, who produce all the news that's fit to print. Hello, this started with our abuse of animals, and the solution is to stop the abuse of animals. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to connect the dots. Why is it that we connect the dots, and that it's such a struggle to get others? And are they finally connecting the dots, Amy Jean?
Well, it is encouraging to see major media outlets running stories talking about the link between this current pandemic and the exploitation of animals. And I think that has largely to do with those of us who have seen the truth with this, speaking out. We're not going to be completely ignored. And so I think that throughout history, a very small number of people have been weighing their decisions based on what is true, instead of based on what their culture or their society or their government taught them, or if you want to call it, brainwashed them to believe. And so the few of us who understand these things, that when you exploit animals, especially in mass numbers like we do on this planet, we run this risk of these viruses jumping from species to species, and animals, different species of animals that have a higher body temperature can handle the virus. But our body temperatures can't get high enough to kill off the virus. And so we rely on the medical industry and things like antibiotics. And we're doing all of that very, very wrong. But because we're taught that some animals we eat, lots and lots and lots of these animals that we eat, and some animals we love, we hit a major stumbling block. It's a stumbling block that some would say is harder to get over than changing your religion. People don't want to change the food that they eat. It's harder to do that than to change their religion. And a lot of it has to do with the people who are making the most money. Like you already mentioned, the meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical industries are making bank off of people in America and around the world, from them consuming the products, thinking that they have to consume these products to be healthy, and when in turn they actually make them sick, when in turn they actually cause pandemics such as coronavirus, COVID-19 right now. And so it's up to the few people who look at this from a very rational and scientific eye and say, well, what are the facts here? There was an article that was run today in The Guardian and by Nick Cohen, and he himself mentions that if we were really looking at this situation with a truth-seeking eye, we'd all be vegan. We'd all be looking at our diets. We'd all stop funding and participating in the industries that are creating these environments to cause disease. And he himself admitted he's not vegan, but at least there are some people out there talking about it, and it's kind of on our shoulders to continue to talk about it and educate people.
Well, that's why we do this independent journalism. And for those watching who say, well, why isn't this being discussed on MSNBC and all the other big networks, the news networks, all you need to do is look at the commercials. Fast food, pharmaceuticals, with an occasional car and insurance commercial thrown in. The vast majority of their ads are based on the meat and dairy industry. And now you have all these ads that they've put together of people, good-hearted people delivering dead animals to other people, when that's exactly the problem. Our abuse of animals in the food system is the source of this problem. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, both of you, with the SAVE movement. First of all, we should explain the SAVE movement for those who don't know, but also talk about now it's a question of a blowback to the meat industry itself. And here are some of the headlines. Poultry workers' death highlights spread of coronavirus in meat plants. This was in the New York Times. And here's another one. There are dozens and dozens of these headlines. Hundreds of meat workers have now tested positive for coronavirus. There are meat plants shutting down. So you have to wonder when it actually starts costing people money, when people start getting afraid to eat the dead animals, and that's what I call them because that's what they are. Mm-hmm. Oh, so rude, so horrifying. Why are you calling them that? Because that's what they are. They're dead animals. And once we make that shift, and instead of looking at it as a slab of meat, whatever that means, and just acknowledge that it's a dead animal, then we can be more real about what it really is. So, Amy Jean, what is your reaction? Well, let me start with Simone, because now you seem quiet there at the sanctuary front. You're at a sanctuary in Rome, Italy. This is so incredible that we have this technology that we can talk to you from Los Angeles to Rome, Italy. But what is your reaction to the fact that it's coming back to haunt the meat industry? Simone.
Well, I cannot say it's good, because we as an animal save movement, we are love-based, and we hope the best for everyone, and we hope the change for everyone in this world. But it's the industry that actually has to pay. This is, I think, a wake-up call for the industry, and they must understand that they need to switch to a plant-based food business in order to avoid those outbreaks again. Until we keep breeding animals inside farms, until we keep exploiting them, we keep creating those breeding grounds for viruses and bacteria. So this is a really wake-up call for this industry to understand that they need to switch to a plant-based food business.
And we're going to try to introduce one other person, Julia Weingartz. Thank you, Julia, for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, where are you, and what is your involvement with the SAVE movement, Julia?
All right, well, I live in Loveland, Colorado, but my involvement with the SAVE movement is with Northern Colorado Animal Save in Greeley, Colorado. The facility that got closed to deaths after shortly bribing their employees $600 a day.
Look, Julia.
Yes.
I'm not going to get into specific allegations against any company for legal reasons, but let's just talk about the fact that slaughterhouses around the United States are shutting down.
Yes.
Right? And you're seeing it where you are. It's happening in Georgia. It's happening in South Dakota. It's happening where you are. It's happening across the country.
Yes.
So, Simone raises such a good point. This is a love-based movement. We never gloat, but truly, if there is something that is bad for us, it's not gloating to say we want that substance that is bad for us to go away. Would it be, Julia?
No, agreed. Absolutely, 100% agreed. I get irritated and angry because I see this on a biweekly basis. I see the lies. I see massive systems of oppression in our world, with this just being one of them. And so I think if you're not angry, there's something wrong. It's the way that you allow that anger to come out in a love-based way. But if you're not agitated, if you're not irritated, to me, there's something wrong. We all have to stand up. It takes a community to deal with this issue, and we need as many people as we can. I just hope this is a huge foundational crack in the system that allows people to think, that allows people to say, wow, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is more dangerous than I thought,
what you just said, I thought was so powerful. A huge foundational crack in the system. Amy Jean Davis, you're the organizer of the Save Movement vigils here in Los Angeles, the largest Save movement of all the 800. Can you explain briefly what the Save movement does and how it relates to this whole crisis?
Well, the Save movement actually has three different branches. We have Animal Save Movement, we have Climate Save Movement, and we have Health Save Movement. I run LA Animal Save, which is an animal save group. And so our goal is to get people to come down and see the animals up close, to see these individuals. So we gather outside of slaughterhouses. There's three different ones in the LA area that we go regularly. And we stop the trucks and we go up to the animals with the pigs. We give them water. It's called bearing witness. And so the goal is to bear witness to the animals, to come as close as we can to the suffering instead of turning away, instead of paying our money and looking the other way while somebody else suffers in the job that is working in a factory farm or on a farm or in a slaughterhouse. And instead we come up and we see these animals and it changes us. And so that is the goal of the Save movement, is for people to see these truths and change their behavior, change their diets, change their way of living, and so that everybody can experience a peaceful life, free from harm, and to not be sick, to not be causing global pandemics, to not be causing the oppression of humans in a lot of different ways, which come from the nature of the animal agriculture industry. So that's our goal of the Save movement, is to just raise awareness and educate people so that we can all live free and free of harm.
So you're seeing two sides of the same coin. You're seeing all of these folks, one in Rome, Simone in Rome, Julia in Colorado, Amy Jean in Los Angeles, bearing witness at the slaughterhouses as the animals go in to be slaughtered, giving them love, giving them water, and also pleading with people, please don't eat these animals. None of that would be happening if you didn't order that bacon or that ham or that hamburger. And now there are many alternatives to those products, which we've created to make it easier for people to, we've created, the vegan entrepreneurs have created to make it easier for people to switch to a plant-based cheese, a plant-based milk, a plant-based animal, a plant-based quote unquote meat. And so now on the other side of the coin, what we're seeing is the breaking news right now is that, and it's not just us saying it, okay? We are seeing, this is a New York Times headline. It was on the front page of the New York Times, which I read online. Poultry workers' death highlights spread of coronavirus in meat plants. Some employees are coming in sick. One woman died after being ordered back to work. Our conditions are out of control. And we also have, you can Google it. There are literally now hundreds of headlines like this. Hundreds of meat workers have now tested positive for coronavirus. And one of the reasons is that they're working elbow to elbow. So, Simone, you are at what was the epicenter of the coronavirus. Now it's in the United States, particularly in the Northeast New York tri-state area. But since Rome and Italy was so badly hit by this, is there a sense that the culture is shifting, that there is this seismic fracture in the culture when it comes to eating animals, Simone?
I think it's soon to say it. I would hope so. We are really talking a lot about it. So the media are really talking about that. And I'm really hoping that there will be a shift. Italy is based on traditions. And one of the main traditions is food for Italians. So it's always a hard topic to talk about here, but there is so much going on, and I really hope that there will be a shift. Media are talking about it, and I never seen so much inside media about animal farming industries like now. So I really hope that there will be a follow-up.
Yes, yeah. And Julia, one of the interesting things is, we've all been agitating and advocating to the major networks, and I always tag some of the big anchors at the cable networks, please talk about this, and they don't. But when it hits us as consumers, I'd say us meaning the culture as consumers, then they're forced to talk about it to a certain degree. I mean, you could say it's morally wrong, what they did to those animals in China is not any different than, for example, this slaughterhouse in New York City. Okay. But these are live chickens being picked up and thrown in a cart. But the point is that they don't talk about that because they're advertiser based and because they're meat eaters themselves. And then you have something where you have a new set of headlines, a new dynamic, a new storyline. Okay, now coronavirus is spreading through all the meat plants, or a good number of them, because they're considered an essential business. We sent somebody down to a local slaughterhouse. We didn't send them. They volunteered and they stayed isolated in their car. One of our contributors wanted to do this on her own, but I thought her information was very interesting. She saw people walking in and out as we're all isolating. They're not wearing masks. They're going in and out. They're just like another day. And this is, they're very low income workers. As Amy Jean mentioned, they don't really have a choice as to what job. Nobody says, hey, I'm going to major in slaughterhouse at college. No, these are people who literally it's food in their mouths or not, a roof over their head or not. That's why they're working in this horrific job that nobody else wants. Certainly not native born Americans. They don't want it. Okay. Mm-hmm. They just want to eat the products and say how loving they are, Julia, now that this has become another kind of story, not a story about treatment of animals, not a story about, even workers being exploited, but a story about consumers not being able to get their fix, their meat fix, because I consider it an addiction, and I speak as a person who has a dubious honor of being an expert in addiction. I'm 25 years sober, and I've written about it in books. So I see it as an addiction. Now that they can't get their fix, now they're talking about it, Julia.
Yes, and isn't that interesting? And what's interesting to me, Jane, is what I call the rhetoric, or the communication that kind of builds walls and distance behind it. Because one of the ploys that they use is, this is an essential business. They talk as if there's nothing else to eat. They talk as if this business goes down, there's nothing else for the consumers to eat, which is just disturbing in and of itself, where we're still like minimalizing the way that we see our food and our food system, that this is what we eat, the meat every single day. So I find that disturbing, and it's upsetting again, where they put these workers into this position to where they do struggle. They feel like they have no way out. And I really have to pride the workers at JBS, because they're the ones that went to the press and actually put the heat on JBS to tell the truth about this.
Thank you, but we're not getting into specific companies just for legal reasons, but thank you. Your point is taken.
I'm so sorry. This is just
all over the country. I mean, anybody can Google it and see that it's happening here, there, and everywhere.
Yes.
And the primary reason is it was considered an essential business. It was categorized that way. In fact, the vice president said to people, keep going to your fast food restaurants and doing this work. Keep going to your, pushing people to go to work despite the fact that it's risking their lives.
Yes, and that's really, yes.
And now, look what happened. It's basically the same mentality as those who refused to social distance and said, we're going to gather in large groups either on Sunday or whenever, and we don't care. And now all those people are at higher risk, and the consequences are starting to happen. It was very short-sighted thinking. Indeed, if the meat industry had been thinking super ahead, they would have closed down voluntarily and prevented it from getting to this point. But what do you see happening down the road, Amy Jean? Because I always am a huge believer in the law of unintended consequences, and I always use this example. I don't think I thought of it, but it's a great example. There were people who advocated for horses, not to be in carriages, even though unfortunately some are still, but obviously a lot less than, let's say, in the 19th century. And all of a sudden the car came along and boom, 90% of horse-drawn carriages went away. Although even in the 1940s, there were historical shots in New York City of people still in some boroughs using horse-drawn carriages, believe it or not. But the vast majority of horses as transportation went away in the United States. So do you see this as the law of unintended consequences when it comes to eating animals, Amy?
Absolutely. And can I mention that back then in the 30s and 40s, the time frame from when they went from everybody using a horse-drawn carriage to most people using a car was around 12 years. If you didn't already know that, 12 years back in the 30s and 40s when they went from horse-drawn carriages to using cars. And that was way before the internet and social media and TVs, in every house. And so what I'd like to see as an unintended consequence of society, but a very intended consequence that we're hoping for, is that it will take a few years off of how long it's going to take before we do switch from an animal-based food system to a plant-based food system. I see the collapse of the meat and dairy industries coming very soon. Within this decade, it's going to happen. And this whole pandemic is just speeding us towards that even faster. So I'm hoping that we'll shave off a couple years or more of getting to that goal of having a plant-based food system. It's better for human beings, for their health. It's better for human beings for their mental and emotional health beyond physical health, because mostly of these workers who are largely immigrants, people of color in these factory farms and slaughterhouses, it's better for them to be working on a farm of plants than inside these killing facilities. And there's a whole lot of killing that goes on in factory farms. It's not just all happening at the slaughterhouses. If anything, there's just a huge amount of killing that goes on in factory farms, because the workers have to go through and find the diseased and the dying animals and get rid of them, because if they don't, it increases the risk of disease growing through the population. So the amount of culling that happens in a in a factory farm or on a farm is a huge amount, and it's not good for the workers. It's not good for them in any way. And so I think that this is one more expression of what happens when we exploit animals. And so I'm hoping that people will take note and they'll stop eating dead animals and switch to what I call not alternative food, but real food. Real food to me is food that you actually get nutrition from, instead of nutrition, a little bit of nutrition plus a whole lot of disease. And with this particular COVID-19 virus, people that are more susceptible to it, to dying from it, are the ones that have pre-existing conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and these are mostly food-caused diseases. So people that are eating animal products are most of the ones who have these diseases, and so they're at more at risk. So it's compounded food trauma, and it's all unnecessary. It's all unnecessary, and I'm hoping that many more people will see that.
And I want to make a very big point. Nobody is wishing. I mean, we wish that nobody had to die. We wish that nobody had to get sick. My heart goes out to people who are ill. My heart goes out to people who have lost loved ones. My heart goes out to many people who have lost their jobs. Okay, this is decimating everyone. So we're trying to say there's a solution. Let's prevent the next pandemic, first of all, because this could be even more severe. And if we don't find out the cause, which we know it emanated from a meat market, a slaughterhouse, a live market, a wet market, they give them different names. Animals were being killed there. And some people say, well, it was wild animals. Actually, it was a mix of wild animals and domestic animals, chickens, raccoon dogs, pangolins, bats. And everybody loves to say bats in China. No, it's not just bats. It may have started in bats, but it's this toxic brew in these alive markets, which are slaughterhouses. Anywhere animals are slaughtered is a slaughterhouse. Okay, so if people like to say wet market because it kind of distances them from the concept, but every single slaughterhouse has the same basic ingredients: feces, blood, urine, guts, eyeballs, tails, snouts, all in a disgusting combination. And we can only show you one quick picture because we don't want to gross you out to the point where you run away from the information. I mean, that's also a catch-22 that we in the animal rights community experience, where we try to talk to people about it. They say, oh no, it's too upsetting. I can't even look. Well, if you can't even look, then you shouldn't be eating those animals. If you can't even look at the animals going into the slaughterhouse, maybe you need to stop eating them. And I say this over and over because it's such a disconnect. Somebody even told me, I don't want to watch a snuff movie. I wouldn't go to that. Why would I want to watch a snuff movie? I'm like, it's not a snuff movie. It's actual killing. This isn't a movie. It's real. And if you don't want to participate, then don't eat the animals or their byproducts. So I think society is facing a reckoning, and it's something that I really hope people will make the connection. It almost seems like nature is smarter than we are. It's like when this first happened, nobody made the connection. Nobody talked about it. And now, well, okay, the slaughterhouses are getting contaminated with coronavirus. Now we have to talk about it, not necessarily for the right reasons, but certainly because of the health of the workers. I mean, think about these poor workers who have to go in there, Julia. Names aside, it's the same.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I have to apologize for everyone. It's so ingrained in my brain. I have to.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But these workers have to go in there, not only do this dirty job, this job that nobody wants, that 99% of the consumers who eat these animals wouldn't be able to do once, much less for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And now they have to risk their lives doing it because the way the slaughter operations are generally elbow to elbow. I mean, this is, it's been called environmental racism. Because again, there's no slaughterhouses on Park Avenue or in Beverly Hills. Okay, it's been called even modern day slavery. Okay, so what are your thoughts on, are people making the connections finally, Julia?
I think they are. I'm a bit of an optimist. I like to think that there's good in everyone and that people are. And I think, again, it is a process. It's an awakening. We are seeing more and more people concerned about their health, about the planet, about the environment. So that's the good thing. As an activist, that's what makes me feel hopeful and keeps me strong. Yes, Jane, I do believe that people are awakening. I do believe, and I want to just go back to what Amy Jean Davis said, that I agree that the dairy and the meat industries are falling, and we can see evidence of it. And I do believe this, and this is a good thing. This is hope for our movement. This is hope for our world.
Yes,
we're seeing evidence.
Simone, I know you are at the sanctuary in Rome, and it's so incredible to talk to you. And I know you're holding up your phone, so thank you for doing all that. But what are your thoughts in terms of the global? We've talked a lot about the slaughterhouses here in the United States getting and people who work there getting infected with coronavirus. Some of them are dying. It's a huge crisis here within a crisis. What's happening vis-a-vis that in Europe? Is the same thing happening?
Yeah, so sorry again for keeping my phone in this way. So
that's all right. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and so the situation here, it's similar. I mean, the virus is spreading. We didn't have this. It didn't happen like in United States where all the slaughterhouses were affected, like there. But anyway, we see even here that those industries are somehow shaking a little bit, because now it's clear that those viruses are coming back again and again and again. And we know that they're coming from those industries, either if it's live markets, if it's animal farming industry, it's a farm, whatever it is, we know that those viruses are coming from those places. And we know, and in Europe, we are talking about it. So those industries also here are somehow shaking a little bit. And yeah, we are just waiting the next step to take as a movement, because that's a lot to do now. It's an important moment for us to raise awareness and to let people know that what we are putting into the plate, it's not bad just for the animals, but it's also something that is killing us. So killing animals is also killing us. We need to raise awareness about that.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, is that killing animals is also killing us. And if you can't make the connection because it's morally wrong, because it's bad for your health, because it's a leading, some argue the leading, but certainly a leading cause of climate change, habitat destruction, wildlife extinction, if you can't make the case that, wow, it's a leading contributor to human world hunger. For example, 70% of all soy is fed to farm animals. If you can't make the case that it's a leading cause of antibiotic resistance, the overwhelming majority of antibiotics produced are fed to farm animals. Now you can make the case, people are dying. They are going in there and dying so that you can have this product and you can make your ham sandwich and or your hot dog or your meat hamburger, and people have risked their lives, and some are even, or your chicken nugget or whatever, your chicken wing. Now people are dying so that you can bring that product. Do you think that might be the final thing where people look at that and they read these headlines? Okay, poultry workers' death highlights the spread of coronavirus. Okay, hundreds of meat workers have now tested positive. Do you think people who have no consideration for all of those other issues might look at that and think, wow, maybe now I need to start listening to that? I mean, what's the thought process? That's what I'd like to know, Amy Jean.
Well, what I'm hoping is that if, especially family members of the people who are dying in the farms and the slaughterhouses, will think twice about who they're putting on their plate, and hopefully they'll choose plants instead, because humans are so complex. We don't know what terrible thing about animal agriculture is going to communicate to them and inspire them to make the switch from animals to plants. So I'm hoping that in this case, especially family members of those who have gotten sick or have died, they'll say, I don't want to be a part of this system. Those companies are already taking advantage of these workers. Factory farms and slaughterhouses already take advantage of workers. And so this is just one more way where they took more advantage of them, and it ended up in some of their deaths. So I'm hoping that the family members will say, I'm done, no more. I'm going to step out of this circle of violence and oppression and put my money into a different system, one that is helpful for everybody involved. And so I'm hoping that is what speaks to them, and just see that not only does animal ag not care about the workers that are being oppressed in these systems. I mean, there's some documented cases of factory farms actually engaging in human trafficking, bringing immigrants in, taking away their passports, and making them work for free. And so like that, the whole perspective that we can just use and abuse humans and animals, I hope people decide, I'm done. This is not for me anymore. I'm going to put my money into a brighter future for this planet.
That would be incredible. I think we're creeping toward that moment. You hear about the tipping point, and I always thought about the tipping point as being something that would involve, Beyond Meat burgers and vegan restaurants, and yet the tipping point may be something entirely different. It may simply be that all these slaughterhouses have to shut down because the workers are all getting coronavirus. Some of them are dying, I shouldn't say all, a goodly percentage of the workers are getting coronavirus, and some of them are dying, and it's got to shut down. And then people start choosing plant-based options, and guess what? They get healthier. It's not such a big deal. It's so easy. The change is so easy. And I always use the alcohol analogy because, before I got sober and I was a daily drinker, I am a recovering alcoholic, and I just celebrated 25 years sober. I felt like life would just be gray without drinking. Oh, I couldn't imagine go to a party or going dancing or having fun or hanging out at the beach. It all was related to alcohol. Just like today, people, they say, well, I could never have a barbecue again. Well, sure you can. And I still go to the beach. I still go to parties. I still, karaoke. I still make a total fool of myself. I do all the things that I used to do, but I do them sober. And so, the same thing is true. I think people have this dire outlook that life without dead animals is going to mean all their traditions are going to go away. No Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no Hanukkah, no whatever, right? No 4th of July. And it's just not true. All it has to do is be adjusted slightly. And you can have it all. Like I celebrate Thanksgiving. You all celebrate Thanksgiving. We don't give it up. We just have a slightly different table. We still have all the things and all the fattening, fabulous food out there. So I think that it's a question of, is our culture a high bottom or a low bottom? In other words, when I got sober, I still had the house, the car, the keys, the job, the relationship. Some people, they only get sober after they drive the wrong way on a freeway and kill a family of 4. It's thank God, there but for the grace of God go I, that I did not cause that kind of wreckage. But that's what I'm waiting to see. This is a play, and we don't know whether it's Act 1, Act 2, or Act 3. But I think it's probably, end of Act 1 and beginning of Act 2. We don't know where this is going to go, and how low we have to go as a culture before we get rid of this toxic, self-destructive, deadly, vile, cruel, irrational. It's an irrational food system. So final thoughts from everybody. We've got such a great audience. We've got a whole bunch of people watching on different platforms. So I always hate to wrap it up when we've got a lot of people watching, but let's get some final thoughts in, starting with you, Simone, at the Animal Sanctuary in Rome, Italy.
So what to say? I mean, this is our time to really understand why this is happening. So we see that the world is blocked, and we see that this system is not working, and we need to all consider this and act accordingly to make a change. So we need to understand that this food system is wrong, and we need to change it, and we need to make sure that everybody is considering that and act now to make sure that the future is going to be different, and we are not going to go into other outbreaks like we just faced. So I think we are in a moment of the history where everybody is at home, and I think we should all take this time to reflect on what happened and to make it better in the future. We can all together make it better.
Absolutely. And there's so many other things beyond not eating animals or their byproducts. I've really started to look at my consumption and do I really need some of the things that I've ordered? And so I'm really self-reflecting on that and how I could do better with that. So I absolutely agree. Our consumer culture is another problem where we all have to, keep up with the Joneses and all that nonsense. So we all have to look at that as well. So, Julia, what are your final thoughts here?
Well, my final thoughts, Jane, are that I believe that sometimes negative things like this coronavirus have to come in order to clear out for the good. I believe this is a sign of the times of changing. I believe this is a paradigm shift. And I believe that people are really starting to see. And again, it is very sad that people had to die. People have gotten sick. But sometimes society needs a bolt of lightning to shake it and wake them up. And that's what I think this functions at. And it's just my hope that through all the news and the media people are seeing, that people will really start to self-reflect and see what a damaging, corrupt system this is, and find other ways to eat, which would be being vegan. All right. To me, that's the only way to be able to save our planet, to our health, the animal cruelty. But I do believe that this is a pinnacle change and this is an awakening. And I do believe we're shifting in our society. And I can see evidence of this. And I'm sorry that sometimes things have to happen, brothers get hurt for society to improve and do better.
Yes, it is tragic. It is tragic that there has to be suffering. For us to hit that. Like, I mean, getting back to the addiction thing, it was when I had a really bad night and made a fool of myself at a party in Hollywood and experienced incomprehensible demoralization the next day. I sought help.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called hitting bottom, and
This
there's
is, yes,
wreckage. There's
this
wreckage
is.
that goes with that.
That's right, because we can no longer continue being a violent culture. It's not who we are. It is not who we are. We are a love-based species, and we have been programmed and brainwashed, in my opinion, to eat these products. And then they have become, Jane, like you're talking, highly addictive. You know, I wasn't born vegan. I participated in this cruelty for a long time, and I can see the addictive nature of these products. But you're right on, and I will stand to testify how easy it is to go from eating flesh to eating plants. It is easier than you think, and that's what's exciting news too, is how easy it is to transition and how wonderful it feels to be a part of this movement and to be a part of some good.
Thank you so much. And Amy Jean, your final thoughts on this?
My final thought is that I hope that people understand that the argument for not being vegan because you want to exercise some kind of personal choice is over. When your personal choice, first of all, has numerous victims, not only the animals that are killed, but the workers trapped in the system, the people in the low-income communities having to live near these farms and slaughterhouses, and the list goes on. First of all, it's not a personal choice for those reasons, for the human reasons. And it's not a personal choice because of the animal reason as well. They're individuals, they don't deserve to be killed. But now I'm hoping that people see that because of what they think is a personal choice to eat animals, and I don't care that this particular pandemic originated in China at a wild animal market, which just means they were breeding wild animals and killing them there. It's not that they're going out and just pulling the wild animals from nature. They're breeding these animals. They just aren't domesticated animals like the ones that we breed mostly in America. So it's the same act, breeding animals, killing and eating them. That act, no matter where it happens, is not a personal choice. This has now resulted in thousands and thousands of people dying because of this virus that we were not prepared to fight off. It's an animal-based disease that we're not ready for. We're not prepared to fight. And so personal choice of being not vegan is gone. That the reason it didn't stand before, and now it's definitely gone. It's causing global pandemics now. And so I hope that speaks to people. I want them to understand that the best part of being human is the ability to choose peace and nonviolence instead of violence. That's the best part of being human. And so when you can participate in a collective of people that are all choosing nonviolence, we won't see these kinds of pandemics. We won't see the kind of injustice that goes on in the animal agriculture industries. So I want people to consider that. Be brave. Consider going against your current social norms. Be a part of this new emerging social norm of living by loving instead of living by killing.
Wow, so well said. And I want to add that, Dr. Rao, who wants to create a vegan world by 2026, and he's a very, very accomplished PhD, Stanford educated, worked with Al Gore, split with Al Gore. He was also very instrumental in the acceleration of the internet speeds. And what he says is the reason why the society's infrastructure, the media, the government, the corporations cling to the meat industry so tightly, as if it's a life raft on a drowning ship, is that it's at the heart of the culture. The heart of the culture right now is still very primitive. We are still a very primitive species. We regard life as a zero-sum game. I win, you lose, right? Everything is based on that. For me to live, you have to die. There are a million phrases, dog eat dog, which is a speciesist phrase, but it's a dog eat dog world. That is the primitive mentality that we're dealing with, where it's a zero-sum game. There's a winner and there's a loser. And what he says is when we break through that primitive mindset and we have that awakening, that what do you call it, like a renaissance or some kind of evolution, where we realize, wait a second, we don't have to kill to survive. We can all live together, and it's not a question of for me to live, you have to die. And so that whole warlike mentality would really be revealed as the primitive mentality it is. And we could evolve as a human species to live in a world of natural abundance. And the other thing he points out is, how do people make money? They make money through scarcity. If something is naturally abundant and it's like the air, it's free. Well, he said if we eliminated the most inefficient food source on the planet, which is animals eat something at least 40 times what they produce as meat or dairy. If you look at a farm animal, all they're doing is eating. It takes 8 to 25 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of steak. So if we eliminated that and everybody had all the food they wanted to eat, not only would we eliminate world hunger, but what happens to the financial system that makes money off of creating artificial scarcity? Okay, the artificial scarcity would drop and food would be like air. Okay, so that's what they're terrified of, is that their money-making system would go out the window and we would need to create an entirely new system. That's why I think, Julia, when you said that this is a big crack in the infrastructure of our system, you're so right. And it doesn't mean, don't politicize that immediately, that means, oh, it's communism or it's socialism. Actually, those are outdated terms as well. What we have today isn't even capitalism, it's corporate socialism. The corporations are subsidized by the government, by our tax dollars. Meat would be so much more expensive if it wasn't subsidized by the government. Okay, the dairy industry is going down right now in crisis. Why? Because the kids aren't in school. They're not being forced to drink milk that they otherwise wouldn't drink if they were left to their own devices. Okay, kids left to their own devices wouldn't be drinking the breast milk of cows. It's totally irrational when you really think about it. But in our primitive culture mindset, where we've been brainwashed to drinking the breast milk of another species, which isn't good for us, kids would go to school and they literally open the carton and they put it in front of the kids and they say, drink it. In fact, you need a doctor's note to get plant-based milks in a lot of school systems. So now that kids aren't being forced to drink the breast milk of a cow, the milk industry is spinning because the schools are closed. So there you go. There's an example of how when you take the government thumb on the scale, which the government is now totally controlled by industry, thanks to Citizens United and a lot of other decisions, you see that actual consumers don't even want the milk anymore. They are not watching Leave It to Beaver, where the kid gets up in the morning and drinks a big glass of milk or pours it on their cereal. And that's the other thing I want to say. I know we were going to wrap it up, but this is such an important part, is that the younger generation, okay, is not watching television. All these ads, now there's a new a dairy campaign ad with farmers walking around lovingly holding calves, even though all undercover investigations show that these poor calves are brutalized. If they're boys, they're shot in the head or put in veal crates, and that it's just a horrifically cruel system. And yet the milk industry is doing this whole campaign about dairy, love life, and all this nonsense. And that's the demographic of people watching those ads is old. Cable news viewers are older. Younger people aren't watching that. So they're not being brainwashed. So you're also going to see that disconnect. And maybe you could address that, Simone, the disconnect of the younger generation not being brainwashed by all that stuff. In fact, they're more likely to see vegan content on social media like Instagram.
Yes, actually, I also can say that when we go out on the street and we try to talk to people, the more receptive ones are the young. So it's always easier to open those kind of conversation and explain the connection between us and the animals, what unites us, what we have in common with young people instead of the adults. So I can confirm this because it's much easier for them to receive the message that we want to give, and they are, how can I say, purer somehow in front of those topics.
All right. Well, we have gone on quite a while, but we've had a lot of views. So I want to thank all of you for joining us. This is the SAVE movement, some of the lead organizers, and they're all over the world. We have Simone in Rome. We have Julia in Colorado. We have Amy Jean in LA. I want to thank you so much for joining us for Jane Unchained Live Talk, and we will see you again soon. Share this out, people. Share it out.